This Film is Lit, the podcast where we finally settle the score on one simple question. Is the book really better than the movie? I'm Brian, and I have a film degree, so I watch the movie, but don't read the book.
And I'm Katie. I have an English degree, so I do things the right way and read the book before we watch the movie.
So prepare to be wowed by our expertise and charm as we dissect all of your favorite film adaptations and decide if the silver screen or the written word did it better. So turn it up, settle in, and get ready for spoilers, because this film is lit. All for one and one for all. It's the Three Musketeers, and this film is lit. Hello and welcome back to This Film is Lit, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books. We have quite a full episode with lots to talk about for the Three Musketeers, every segment except for Lost in Adaptation. So we're going to get right into it with Let Me Sum Up.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
If you have not read or seen The Three Musketeers, any of the versions, there's another new one coming out. I just saw a trailer for a French version that has Ava Green in it.
Well, not having seen any version, I'm not sure it would help you. We'll get to that later.
Okay, fair enough. But anyways, if you have not read or seen any of The Three Musketeers, we're going to first give you a brief synopsis of the book.
And if you haven't read the book, I cannot blame you because it is 700 pages long. It goes like this. In 1625 France, D'Artagnan leaves his family in Gascony and travels to Paris to join the Musketeers. Along the way, he gets into a fight with an older swordsman whom he also spies conversing with a beautiful, mysterious woman. His letter of introduction to Monsieur de Treville, the commander of the Musketeers, is also stolen at this time. D'Artagnan resolves to avenge himself upon the older man, who is later revealed to be Count Roquefort. Roquefort? I don't really know how to say it. Upon arriving in Paris, Monsieur de Treville turns down D'Artagnan's application to the Musketeers, but recommends him to the city guard where he can gain necessary experience. From Treville's window, D'Artagnan sees Roquefort passing in the street below and rushes out of the building to confront him, but in doing so, he offends three musketeers, Athos, Porthos, and Aramis. D'Artagnan must fight a duel with all of them that afternoon. As D'Artagnan prepares himself for the first duel, he realizes that Athos' seconds are Porthos and Aramis, who are astonished that D'Artagnan intends to duel them all. Cardinal Richelieu's guards appear and attempt to arrest D'Artagnan and the Three Musketeers for illegal dueling. Although they are outnumbered 4-5, the four men win the battle. They become friends. Shortly after, D'Artagnan's landlord speaks to him about the kidnapping of his wife, Constance. She works for Queen Anne of France, who is secretly having an affair with the English Duke of Buckingham. The king, Louis XIII, gave the queen a gift of diamond studs, but she gives them to her lover as a keepsake. Cardinal Richelieu, who wants war between France and England, plans to expose the tryst and persuades the king to demand the queen wear the diamonds to an upcoming ball. Constance tries to send her husband to London to fetch the diamonds from Buckingham, but he's manipulated by Richelieu and thus does not go, so D'Artagnan and his friends intercede. En route to England, the cardinal's henchmen repeatedly attack them, and only D'Artagnan and his servant Planchet reach London. Although Milady stole 2 of the diamond studs, Buckingham provides replacements. D'Artagnan is thus able to return a complete set of jewels to Queen Anne just in time to save her honor. D'Artagnan then begins an affair with Constance, but she is shortly after kidnapped again. While attempting to discover where she is, D'Artagnan meets Milady and recognizes her as one of the cardinal's agents, but becomes infatuated with her. Entering her quarters in the dark, he pretends to be her lover, but reveals himself shortly after. Milady attempts to kill him, but D'Artagnan escapes. He is later ordered to the siege of La Rochelle, where he is informed that the queen has rescued Constance from prison. At an inn, the musketeers overhear the cardinal asking Milady to murder Buckingham. Richelieu gives her a letter that excuses her actions as under orders from the cardinal himself, but Athos takes it from her. They warn her brother-in-law, Lord de Winter, and the Duke of Buckingham. Milady is imprisoned upon arrival in England, but she seduces her guard and escapes. Upon her return to France, Milady hides in a convent where Constance is also hiding. She fatally poisons Constance before D'Artagnan can rescue her. The musketeers arrest Milady before she reaches Cardinal Richelieu. They bring in official executioner, put her on trial, sentence her to death, and execute her. After her execution, the four friends return to the siege of La Rochelle. The cardinal's guards arrest D'Artagnan and take him to the cardinal. When questioned about Milady's execution, D'Artagnan presents her letter of pardon as his own. Impressed with D'Artagnan's willfulness and secretly glad to be rid of Milady, the cardinal destroys the letter and writes a new order, giving the bearer a promotion to lieutenant in the Treville Company of Musketeers, leaving the name blank. D'Artagnan offers the letter to Athos, Porthos, and Aramis, but each refuses it, Athos because it is beneath him, Porthos because he is retiring to marry his wealthy mistress, and Aramis because he is joining the priesthood. D'Artagnan, though heartbroken and full of regrets, finally receives the promotion he had coveted. The end.
All right, here is a brief summary of Disney's 1993 The Three Musketeers. A lot of this is sourced from Wikipedia.
As was mine.
Yeah. A young, skilled fencer named D'Artagnan is on his way to Paris to join the Musketeers and follow in his murdered father's footsteps. Before leaving, he duels the brother of a woman that he had bed, thus blemishing her honor. These brothers end up chasing D'Artagnan for the rest of the film. We'll get back to them later. Meanwhile, in Paris, Cardinal Richelieu has his captain of the guard, Rochefort, disband the Musketeers, purportedly to help. The Musketeers at this point are the bodyguards of the king, basically, purportedly to help in the coming war against England. But three of the Musketeers, Athos, Porthos, and Aramis, refuse to give up their tabards and their swords. Upon arriving in Paris, D'Artagnan meets one of the queen's handmaidens named Constance, and the two fall for each other in their brief meeting. He then manages to independently offend all three remaining musketeers and plans to meet them outside of town for a duel that afternoon. Arriving for the duel, D'Artagnan realizes that the men are the musketeers he was seeking and helps them defeat a cohort of the cardinal's guards who had arrived to arrest the three remaining musketeers. Impressed by his swordplay and his spirit, the musketeers tell him to flee as they make their own escape, but D'Artagnan is captured. In the dungeon, he overhears a meeting between Cardinal Richelieu and Milady de Winter, where the cardinal plots to assassinate and supplant the king, tasking Milady de Winter with delivering a treaty to the Duke of Buckingham. D'Artagnan is caught again and ordered to be executed after refusing to give up the whereabouts of the musketeers. During the execution, he is actually saved by the musketeers, and the four flee and plan to retrieve the treaty in order to prove that the cardinal is plotting treason against the king. The group is forced to split up during the escape, and an injured D'Artagnan meets Milady de Winter, whom he is unaware is the spy, as he didn't see her earlier when he was overhearing the conversation, and accidentally divulges that he knows about the secret plot. Milady de Winter tries to murder him, but is stopped, arrested, and ordered to be executed for a previous murder of her previous husband, the one after Athos, I think, or Aramis, I think. It is also revealed that Milady is the ex-wife of Athos. No, Athos, who left her after discovering that she had been branded a murderer in her earlier life. The musketeers retrieve the treaty, and just as Milady is about to be executed, Athos begs her forgiveness for turning her in, and she reveals that the cardinal intends to assassinate the king at his birthday celebration before throwing herself to her death off of a cliff. Our three musketeers rally the rest of the retired or disbanded musketeers, storm the celebration to interrupt the assassination attempt. They succeed, and an army of musketeers squares off with the cardinal's guards. D'Artagnan duels and kills Rochefort, who we find out at this point was the guy who murdered D'Artagnan's father. Aramis, after surviving being shot by the cardinal thanks to his crucifix that he wears, he's very devoutly religious, attempts to apprehend the escaping cardinal, but King Louis steps up and punches Richelieu, knocking him into the river. The musketeers are reinstated by the king. D'Artagnan is knighted as a musketeer. Not knighted, I guess. Musketeered as a musketeer. I don't know what that process is called. And the musketeers help defend him from the women's brothers from the beginning of the film that I mentioned. The end. Okay. We have a Guess Who. That's fun.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
All right.
Who are you?
No one of consequence.
I must know.
Get used to disappointment.
Okay?
A face long and brown, high cheekbones, a sign of sagacity, the maxillary muscles enormously developed, an infallible sign by which a Gascon may always be detected, even without his cap, and our young man wore a cap set off with a sort of feather, the eye open and intelligent, the nose hooked but finely chiseled, too big for a youth, too small for a grown man.
I have no idea. This could be anybody. I also do not know what sagacity means. I don't know what that term is.
I really hope I
Sagacity.
pronounced it right.
The quality of being sagacious. Thank you. Great. Having or showing understanding and the ability to make good judgments. So kind of like being wise,
I guess.
A sign of wisdom, I guess, would be another way to say that, kind of, maybe. Also, what is a Gascon? I don't know what that is.
It's the region of France that this character is from.
Oh, okay. Goodness. Even without his cap, and I'm gonna assume that this is D'Artagnan.
It is.
Because of the youth and the
Yeah, it is D'Artagnan.
Okay. I mean, I don't really have any reason to think that other than literally the only thing that made me think that was the too big for a youth and too small for a grown man, insinuating that maybe he's younger than some of our other characters and kind of green or whatever. But
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he is a Gascon, which much is made of throughout the text.
Okay.
It's mentioned frequently, and I don't. It's a part of like French culture that I'm not really sure.
Do not understand.
The text also informs us at one point that the Gascons are the Scots of France. So make of that what you will.
Fair enough.
All right, up next. A man from 40 to 45 years of age, with black and piercing eyes, pale complexion, a strongly marked nose, and a black and well-shaped mustache.
Black piercing eyes, pale complexion, strongly marked nose, and a black and well-shaped mustache. I mean, the guy who has, there's lots of mustaches. Well, they're not just mustaches, but the one that immediately stuck out to me, because he wears black all the time, not that this says he's wearing black, but I'm getting the vibes of a villain here, and so I'm thinking this may be Rochefort.
Yes, it is.
Nice. He does have a mustache in the film. And I think he's maybe the only one that has just a mustache, or like the most striking. He also has a little
he has like a little
soul patch thing underneath the. That whole look is got a name that I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah, I don't know.
Anyways,
she was pale and fair, with long curls falling in profusion over her shoulders, had large blue languishing eyes, rosy lips, and hands of alabaster.
This could be any of the women in this movie except for probably the queen. She doesn't particularly this doesn't particularly strike me as like applying to the queen. I would say that this would either be Constance or Milady de Winter, and I'm gonna say that this is Milady de Winter.
It is Milady
I am crushing
de Winter.
it. I'm just guessing. I'm getting lucky.
You're doing great. She was a charming woman of 25 or 26 years, with dark hair, blue eyes, and a nose slightly turned up, admirable teeth, and a complexion marbled with rose and opal. There, however, ended the signs which might have confounded her with a lady of rank. The hands were white, but without delicacy. The feet did not bespeak the woman of quality.
So I'm going to say this is not the queen, assuming the queen is in the book or mentioned very much, but this could be, assuming this character is in the book, Constance, who is the woman that D'Artagnan falls in love with in the film. And I'm going to say this is Constance. She's a handmaiden, so the parts about you could not confound her with a lady of rank and blah, blah, blah. She doesn't have she's not a noble. So I'm going to say that this might be Constance.
It is Constance.
Is she a handmaiden in the...
She's a seamstress, but she does work for the queen.
Okay.
Her eyes, which cast the brilliancy of emeralds, were perfectly beautiful, and yet were at the same time full of sweetness and majesty. Her mouth was small and rosy, and although her underlip protruded slightly beyond the other, it was eminently lovely in its smile, but as profoundly disdainful in its contempt. Her skin was admired for its velvety softness. Her hands and arms were of surpassing beauty, all the poets of the time singing them as incomparable. Lastly, her hair, which, being light from her youth, had become chestnut, and which she wore curled very plainly and with much powder, admirably set off her face.
I'm going to go out and say this is the queen.
It is the queen.
Yeah, it seems pretty straightforward based
Seems
on that.
Queenish.
Yeah, of the description of nobility for sure.
Okay, last one. Standing before the chimney was a man of middle height, with piercing eyes, a large brow, and a thin face, surmounted by a pair of mustaches.
A pair of them?
I'm not sure.
Maybe it's like if you have it.
If you have
split
like a
in the
little
middle,
gap, that's what I think
I
it means.
guess that
I'm
must
not
be
for
what
sure
that
though.
means. Interesting.
Although this man was scarcely 36 or 37 years of age, hair, mustaches, and royal all began to be gray.
And royal. I mean, I assume this is probably the king. Almost is the king.
This is the cardinal.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because the king, I don't know if he's as young as he is in the movie, but I think he's supposed to be younger.
Okay, I was just
well
going
in the
out on a
book.
limb and saying that maybe he wasn't, that maybe they gave us the king depiction in the film was like not, I don't know, it was just a creative choice and not like what the king actually was like. But cardinal makes sense fairly. I mean, it's not a lot to go on there, but, and he has like a goatee in the film, and he's got like little like,
It's got like the Danzo's mustache are like
pointed
out a little
very
bit.
villainous. It's great. Well, I almost crushed it. I almost got 100% on that, but I just missed the last one. It's still not too bad, but 5 out of 6. Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. All right, I have quite a few questions. Let's find out if that was in the book.
Nicholas Flamel is the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone.
The what?
Honestly, don't you two read?
So we're introduced to our villain right at the beginning of the film before anybody else. We're watching him sail through the catacombs in Paris or whatever, in the river in the rivers, in the dungeons or whatever, and he ends up confronting this guy who's locked up, was stealing something basically, and was like, I was trying to feed my family, and then he's like, yeah, well, tell that to God or whatever. It's not what he says. He says that later, I think, but and then has his Rochefort just murder this poor guy who is, stealing to feed his family. And I want to know if our villain in the book is an evil cardinal that just murders poor people, because I love that for this movie.
So the cardinal is one of the primary villains in the text, and he is corrupt, but it's a little more nuanced in the book. He's not like the cartoonish villain that you get in the film.
Yeah.
There's not a scene that I recall where he personally orders the death of a prisoner in like the catacombs of the Bastille or whatever that's supposed to be.
Yeah.
But that's not to say he couldn't.
But he is the villain, a villain.
He's one of the main villains. Like him and Milady are the two like big villains.
Yeah.
And then Rochefort is kind of a lesser villain.
Well, that would be almost exactly like the movie. Although I would argue Milady de Winter isn't like a villain necessarily in the film so much as she is like a mercenary kind of.
How the movie utilizes Milady.
I thought she was really interesting. We'll get to it. I thought her character was like maybe the most interesting part of the film. But anyways, we'll get to that later. But yeah, it's a similar 3 protagonists then, or like main or antagonists in that regard. So I didn't know how this worked, but I didn't remember this being the case. But D'Artagnan, who I think is probably the name that I remember the best as being a musketeer, does not start this as a musketeer. He is joining the Musketeers, and I want to know if that is how the book does it, or if he's already a musketeer. I just wasn't, because if you would asked me like who's like in the Three Musketeers, who was one of the 3 Musketeers, I'd probably be like D'Artagnan, maybe, I don't know, like before watching it.
Yeah.
And so it was a kind of surprised, be like, wait a second, oh, okay, he's not, he's joining. Interesting. Is that a similar plot element from the book?
Yes. The way that the book starts is very different from the way that the movie starts, but D'Artagnan does have the same basic goal. He wants to get to Paris. He wants to join the Musketeers. So our movie starts with him like in a fight with these brothers, and then he like goes to Paris kind of to get away from them, it seems like.
I think he was already going to Paris, but because he tells the guy when he's fighting him that he's like heading to Paris after he finishes with him. He's going to Paris to become a musketeer, but he just kind of does it in haste after all the brothers show up to chase him.
But the book starts, and I don't have big opinions on the difference between the starts of these two pieces of media. I just wanted to cover it because it is quite different.
Yeah.
The book starts with his dad, who is not dead, basically sending him out on a quest. To become a musketeer.
Nice.
And like bequeaths him a sword and gives him a healing potion.
A healing potion?
Yeah. And then sends him off. It's a magic healing potion, or he gives him like
There's magic in this?
No.
Oh.
But kind of, because it's a recipe for a potion that comes from his mother's people, that can heal any wound.
Okay.
Which the text then proceeds to forget about after about 100 pages.
Never comes back. Cool.
And then he cries saying goodbye to his mom, which I thought was very cute.
Okay. Interesting. But yeah, similar. Definitely the same idea.
Yeah.
So, does the book also start? Because it's another thing that I wasn't expecting with the Musketeers being disbanded. The Cardinal has them disbanded, and then that's also why it's called the Three Musketeers. Is that our three main characters, or three of our main characters, Porthos, Aramis, and Athos, refuse to give up their banner or whatever and turn in their sword. So they're the Three Musketeers, and I wanted to know if that element of the Cardinal or somebody disbanding the Musketeers came from the book, because I thought I was like, well, I guess it probably does, because there's a reason it's called the Three Musketeers, although it could just be about the three of them, and there's still other ones. Anyways, what's the deal with that?
So at no point do the Musketeers get disbanded during this book. That's a movie thing.
Okay.
The king does momentarily flirt with the idea at the very beginning of the book. He says something about like ending this 2-guard party system that we have, because they keep like the Musketeers and then the Cardinal's guards keep getting in fights with each other. He's like, we have to put a stop to this. But that plot idea like fizzles and doesn't go anywhere. I'm pretty sure that the book is called The Three Musketeers because 3 of the 4 main characters are musketeers.
I mean, that makes sense.
I guess the 4 musketeers didn't have quite the same ring to it.
Yeah. And he's not a musketeer.
Right. Well, he's not a musketeer until later, at which point, yes, all 4 main characters are in fact musketeers.
Okay, so yeah, it's not they're not disbanded. I thought that was interesting. I kind of like it. I think it works.
I think it makes a lot of sense,
and I think it gives you a nice moment at the end where they all like show back up, and you get like, oh, like it, yeah. Because otherwise you'd be like, well, why aren't they getting help from other blah blah blah? It like kind of helps ease the story along in a way that I think kind of works for what the movie's doing, making it like a fun borderline, just like a chase movie. It's just like nothing but horse chases in this movie. Horse chases and sword fights.
What more do you need?
Yeah. So there is an evil cardinal we have established, Cardinal Richelieu, and I wanted to know if kind of the main plot of the film is that this Cardinal Richelieu, played by Tim Curry, is consolidating power under himself and plotting to essentially usurp the throne, utilizing his cardinal guards and whatnot in order to, among other things, other political kind of machinations, in order to usurp the throne and steal it from King Louis. And I want to know if that is the plan in the book.
So the cardinal is obviously a very powerful political figure in the book, but he isn't trying to directly usurp the throne of France. Like, he is trying to maintain and increase the power and reputation of the king and France, thereby increasing his own power, but more as like a puppet master, it seems like in the book. It is also implied that at one point the queen rejected his advances, so that is part of his motivation as well, is like getting revenge on her.
Which is one of
for
the things in the
rejecting
film
him.
that
Yeah.
we see kind of he's a creep to her and she always rejects him and whatnot. I will say I think that makes more sense, the book's version of it, instead of like literally plotting
Yeah,
to
I
like
don't-
assassinate the king and take the throne. I'm not saying that couldn't work.
But it feels
But it
like a long
feels
shot.
like a real tough ploy, whereas you already have all the
Yeah.
power you could possibly
Yeah.
want, basically. Just the kind of, again, the backroom dealings of yes,
Yeah,
being
the
the
man
puppet
behind the
master,
curtain.
yeah, being the you know, being the actual seat of power and kind of using the king as just like a figurehead, basically. That makes a lot more sense. I think for the purposes of a children's action adventure movie, they're like, that's maybe a little complicated to like try to, you know, get the idea across of like him
It's not Game of Thrones.
right, yeah. That idea of our antagonist's goal being like increase France's power and thus increase his power and kind of do it all from behind the scenes doesn't make for like a very understandable and easily digestible sort of villain for our protagonist to defeat. Whereas I'm gonna kill the king and take the throne is
and
very
then having
easy.
him literally go sit on the throne.
Yeah, it's very easy for kids to kind of get what's going on there. It's just like a more, it's very much a dumbed down version of what is happening in the book. So yeah, I kind of figured it would probably be something more like that. But I was wondering, because it isn't completely outlandish, that I'm sure it has happened that, you know, powerful theocratic, you know, figureheads have had kings and stuff that they worked for assassinated in ways to like take the throne or whatever. You would think, again, if the movie were, I think, were being a little more clever about it, they would have found a way to, instead of the cardinal literally trying to go sit on the throne, like he's gonna have the king assassinated, but he has some like stooge who's gonna come in, who's like a cousin or, you know, somebody who's he is like bought.
Right, because, you know, when the succession is based on bloodlines, it's a hard sell to think like, oh, this other guy could just
take the throne. Yeah. And again, it's not like it's impossible. France's monarchy is rife with crazy power transitions, I'm sure, and not just France's, but it's still, I think the book's version definitely makes a lot more sense. So the Rochefort character, I wanted to know if he was in the book, because he is maybe my favorite character in the movie. He's played by this actor named Michael Wincott, and he just goes for it. He's incredible. I thought he was so much fun. He also reminded me a lot. I think part of it was the eyes and specifically the mustache, the facial hair, because it's the exact same facial hair Val Kilmer has in Tombstone when he's playing Doc Holliday.
Oh, God.
And he actually looked a lot like Val Kilmer in this role to me. And again, the facial hair was a big part of it. But I thought he was just a lot of fun and a great villain. His voice is really, really good. And I want to know if that character is a similar character in the book.
Yeah, he is. He's the cardinal's personal spy.
Oh, he's a spy.
Yeah.
Okay, because he doesn't really come across as a spy so much in the film.
Not so much.
More so just like... Yeah.
But yeah, they call him like the Cardinal's man a lot during the book, and he gets set up right away as a direct antagonist to D'Artagnan.
He's definitely like in the film, he's like his number, you know, the Cardinal's like number 2
guy. Right-hand man.
He organizes he's the captain of the guard, so like he does all this, he does all the like military, you know,
dirty
work kind of stuff. And is in the book, is he also a very skilled swordsman like he is in the film? Okay. I wasn't, I mean, I assumed as captain of the guard, you would think he probably would be. Is he captain of the guard in the...
No.
No, okay.
I don't think so. He's a count.
Oh, okay. So we've established that D'Artagnan is in it, and it's a similar premise of him wanting to be a musketeer and going to Paris to join. And I wanted to know if he gets introduced to the Three Musketeers by getting into scuffles and challenging them all to duels, because that is an incredibly fun and silly setup for... introducing and then going to have to duel all of them at the same time is a very fun and setup for introducing our main protagonist, or maybe main protagonist, to our other protagonists. I thought that was great.
That actually is what happens in the book.
That's wild to me.
Yeah. The initial tiffs that they get into aren't exactly the same, but D'Artagnan does manage to offend and schedule duels with all three of them.
That's amazing.
For that same afternoon. And then when they show up, they're impressed by his audacity and gumption.
So pretty much exactly. But it is, yeah, that's fun. I would have assumed, to me, it felt so silly. I was like, this feels like it's like a comedy like thing.
Honestly, the book is very funny.
Yeah.
It's not like a super serious, like
Right.
there's a lot of kind of like comedy of error type things that happen.
That's fun. That's interesting. I don't know if I would have expected that. Just what little I knew about the Three Musketeers, like the book. I'm not sure I would have, if I had to guess, I wouldn't have been like, yeah, it's probably pretty humorous. I don't know. I might, maybe, but I'm not sure I would have thought it was. Is there any mention in the book of this sweet three-bladed main gauche that this guy had? I don't even know how to, gauche? I don't know how to pronounce it. I just know that's how it's spelled. In the film, during the fight, after he goes to the duel, and then all the Cardinals guards show up and they're fighting everybody. At one point, Porthos, who is like a secret agent in this, who has gadgets and stuff in the movie. They have him have all kinds of silly gadgets or whatever. But in particular, this one is a real thing, and I think most of them are, but this one in particular it looks super silly. He pulls out this thing and then he hits a button and it like splits into 3 blades and he like breaks a guy's sword with it. And if you didn't know better, you would be like, well, that is some silly nonsense. But that is a real weapon. It's called a trident dagger, and it worked almost exactly as it did in the movie. In fact, I knew it was a thing, but I was like, I know that the trident dagger thing is like a real like weapon and is used in this time period as a main gauche, however you pronounce it. It's like basically an offhand weapon with your rapier that is used for like parrying and blocking and stuff like that. And there's a bunch of different kinds of them, but that is one of them. It wasn't as popular as some of the other ones. If you look up the term main gauche, the main one just kind of looks like a small rapier, basically, like a very tiny, like dagger-sized rapier. But there is one that is 3-sided. I would have assumed that it was just 3 blades that were like permanently fixed, but I was on Wikipedia reading. Initially, in my notes, it wasn't spring-loaded like it is in the movie, but it is like the same idea, basically. And then in the Wikipedia article, it says that there were versions of it that were spring loaded and that you would hit it and it would like deploy the 2 outside.
Imagine being the first guy to take that to a duel.
Right? Yeah.
Or better, imagine being the first guy to duel against the first guy to take that to a duel.
Yeah, but I want to know if that weapon was mentioned in the book, because I thought that was super fun little detail that whoever was working on the film, which makes sense because I'm sure what's his name, the guy I mentioned,
the swordmaster,
like that guy knows, he knows his stuff, Bob whatever, and so but I thought that was super fun. I want to know if it's mentioned in the book at all.
There was no mention of that kind of weapon that I can recall. I did try a couple different search terms in my ebook version of it, but I didn't return anything.
Yeah. Okay. Okie doke. Do the Musketeers save? So all this happens. D'Artagnan ends up being caught, and then he overhears the plot, and then he gets caught again, and then he's gonna get executed. They drag him out to the town square to chop his head off, and as he's about to get his head chopped off, the Three Musketeers reveal themselves. They are the executioners. Somehow they have finagled their way onto the dais, or the whatever it's. I don't know what that's called. There's got to be a name for that stage where you execute people.
I don't know.
It's because gallows for like hanging, but like there's got to be a.
The executioner's block is the thing that you kneel
like
over,
the
right?
Specific, yeah, I feel like the stage area. I don't know. Whatever, doesn't matter. I feel like it has to have a name that I'm just not aware of what it is. But I wanted to know if that fun reveal where they're like, "Ha, we're here, we're saving you," blue, is if that happens in the book.
It's not from the book.
So it's not in this book. I had read that in somewhere during the movie notes when I was doing my research for the prequel, that apparently this supposedly happens in one of the sequels.
Yeah, and that is a good caveat that we should mention. There are 2 sequels to this book.
Yeah.
I did not read either of them because I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
But it is possible that the movie
Certain
sourced things
yes.
from those two sources.
That would make a lot of sense. And yeah, in this particular instance, I think I read somewhere that this execution, like,
I mean, it's
reverse heist
certainly
or
like
whatever is.
having read the Three Musketeers now, it does sound like something that Dumas would put in
Okay.
one of his adventure books.
Yeah.
But I didn't read either of the sequels, so it's not in book one.
There you go. But yeah, if somebody has read the sequels, if you could confirm for us whether or not that happens, that would be great. So, as they're making their escape, they steal the Cardinal's carriage, and they're riding out of the city. And they find underneath the seat in the carriage, they find a bunch of wine, but also a big like chest full of money. And Aramis, Charlie Sheen's character, says something, I can't remember what he said. He basically just says, redistribute that wealth. And then he has D'Artagnan just throw the money out onto the streets for all the peasants. And I wanted to know if the Three Musketeers go around redistributing any wealth in in the book, because I enjoyed that scene.
They do not.
Okay.
I would say that this may be sourced from some other folklore. Robin Hood.
Robin Hood, yeah.
In fact, I would venture to say that the Musketeers in the book would never.
Okay.
Huge swaths of this book are just them bemoaning how broke they are and scheming ways to fund their lifestyle.
Okay.
They like to live high on the hog.
All right,
they
yeah.
like to eat well. They like to drink well.
Right.
They like to womanize.
Yeah. I mean, we see all of this in the
Yes.
film.
The only scene from the book that comes kind of close is after they duel and kill some Englishmen. And they don't want to be, quote, heirs of the enemy, is what they
Okay.
call it. So they give the money that they took off of the bodies of to the Englishmen's servants instead of
Okay.
taking it. But through the rest of the book, they seem to have no qualms about looting corpses.
Right.
So I'm not really sure what was going on in that specific part.
They have no qualms about looting corpses, and they don't seem particularly disposed to, like, they don't have particularly, like, political leanings of, like, hey,
No.
we should help the little people or anything like
They
that.
seem not at all concerned about the little people
Okay.
throughout the book.
Okay, fair enough. Speaking of their lifestyle, we get a scene in the film where after they do make their escape, they get to a tavern, and Porthos, well, all of them except for Athos, because he's just drinking alone like a sad man. They decide they need to teach D'Artagnan how to wench, is what they could say in the film. And I want to know if anything from that scene was in the book, because it was an interesting scene for a kid's movie.
There's like a little bit of bawdiness here and there throughout the book, but there's not a scene anything like this
Yeah,
one.
yeah. Not to say, I say for a kids movie, it's not like it's particularly. They're mostly just like kissing and like and reciting poetry and stuff. But
interesting.
it's one of those scenes where you're like, all right, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a fun scene, mainly because I think Oliver Platt is great in this movie. Porthos, I think he's just fantastic. But anyways, yeah, it's an interesting scene, but they don't teach D'Artagnan how to winch in the film.
No, but I turned to you during this scene and asked if you and your friends ever sat around comparing notes on how you seduce women.
No, we did not. But I don't know. I'm sure I know some weirdos do. It's just not a thing that me or my friends were ever like into, just that whole, like all of that, like the, like just sitting around and like talking about women or whatever is just it's not a thing me and my friends ever did. It's not really. We were drinking that respect women juice too much. So. Oh, goodness. Also, we were nerds. So, is there a spy working against the king who not... So, obviously, that it seems like probably to some extent, but specifically, I want to know if the spy... Because in the film, the spy is Milady de Winter, who is the ex-wife of Athos. And he's really broken up about turning her in when he found out that she was a murderer. It's a whole little, like... side story subplot in this film that I thought was super interesting, and I wanted to know if that element came from the book. The whole Milady de Winter stuff.
Yeah. So she is one of the main antagonists in the book. She is Athos's ex-wife, as well as being a branded criminal.
Okay, so all those elements track.
Yes. She is pure evil in the book, and
Okay.
her character is so much fun.
Hmm.
The movie really doesn't compare, in my opinion.
Okay, fair enough. I really thought her character was interesting. I assumed it had to come from the book in some capacity because what happens in the film felt like such a strange thing to like work into. If you're Disney making a fun action movie, to work in this subplot where one of your protagonists spurned his former wife because he found out she was a murderer, and now he feels really terrible about it, and then she is a murderer, and she ultimately ends up getting executed, or is going to be executed, but then commit suicide. It felt like a whole big thing to add to the movie if there was like no element of it in the book at all. But I did read that I thought was interesting, that this is apparently at least the first and maybe only time in a Disney film that a character, or at least I think this is what I read, that a character commits suicide. And like,
Yeah, I don't know. In the book, she actually does get executed.
yeah,
Like, they execute her. So I guess Disney decided that suicide was more palatable than having her actually be executed. I don't know.
guess, yeah. Well, I mean, it definitely gives her more agency in that moment, you know what I mean, as opposed to just being executed. But yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, I really like it. We'll talk more about it later. I really like that whole thing. I thought it was like, again, the most interesting like layered thing going on there. Again, in this kids film where most of it's just kind of like sword fighting and horse chases. But so we find out that Porthos in the film used to be a pirate after they get onto a fight on a ship, and they encounter some guys and they're like, "Oh my God, it's Porthos the pirate," or something like that. And they're like, you were a pirate?" And he's like, "Eh." And I want to know if any of our musketeers were formerly a pirate.
Not that I know of. Athos was a nobleman. Aramis was joining the priesthood.
Okay, so those are both
well, we know.
the same.
Porthos is just described as the most worldly
Okay.
of the three, so maybe he's well-traveled.
Yeah. I mean, which he is in the film. Like, he talks all the time about all the different, like, places he's been, and he has, like, I think that's part of the reason he has all these, like, silly gadgets and stuff, is that he's, you know, he's supposed to have collected them on his travels, because he talks about meeting somebody in, like, China. You know, like, he's been all around the world. And the movie's conceit is that his reason for doing that was that he was a pirate, I assume. Whereas the book, it's not explicitly stated why he's so well traveled. Are there any problematic Asian characters in the book? I mean, it's from the 1600s, so it would not surprise me. But in the film, we get this one character who's like a villain who he's not overly problematic most of the film, but there's a couple of moments where he, like the one scene in particular, like where Porthos defeats him, he like pulls these swords out and he's just like screaming. It's like this like stereotypical like
It's like
wild like
warrior, like
yeah.
I don't even know what the name of that trope would be.
Yeah, but he's just like screaming and spinning his swords all around, and it's just like, all right. Before that, he's just like a guy. Like, he just seems like a dude. It's like, all right, that's fine. And then that scene just kind of feels like a little strange. Anyways, I wanted to know if that character is mentioned in the book at all or any of that.
No problematic Asian characters that I can recall. There is, you'll be shocked and stunned to know, some historical anti-Semitism.
Anti-Semitism?
What?
In a thing? Never. I don't believe it. Famously, no media has ever been anti-Semitic.
Overall, it's not a huge element in the book, but that's like here and there.
Okay. Fair enough. That did not make its way into the film, at least not that I caught. If it did, it flew under the radar for me. So there's this great line that after Lady de Winter is being... She's caught, she's in a jail cell, she's set to be executed in the morning, and Athos comes in to talk to her. And she has this amazing line in the film where she says, because, again, the backstory is that she was a murderer. He found out by finding, like, she's, like, branded or whatever. And he ended up turning her in to the authorities or something, and that's why they're not together anymore, blah, blah, blah. And he's still really broken up about this because he did really love her and all this sort of stuff. But in this scene, she says to him as they're kind of talking in the cell, "I have become the nightmare you once thought me to be." And I was like, that's a metal-ass line, and I wanted to know if that came from the book.
It did not, but it is a great line.
Yeah, because like I said, I would watch a movie about her. I want to know what
I would also watch a movie about her.
She seems awesome. Again, in the film, I think she's really interesting because she seems, and I don't think, and if they did, I missed it. They never go into the backstory in explicit enough detail, and if they did, maybe I'm just misremembering of like what it was or what the circumstances of her being a murderer were like originally, that prior to Athos.
Let me see if I can conjure my memories. It was a long book. Okay,
Yeah,
there was a lot of detail.
Yeah.
So I think the reason that she originally got branded as a criminal, not specifically a murderer, I don't think, but as a criminal, it was that she was in a nunnery and like ran off with a priest, and they like stole like gold or like gold plates or something like that. And I think he ends up dead, but she gets caught and branded.
Okay.
But it's like escapes, and then later on she like passes herself off as not a criminal.
So she's branded as a criminal, not a murderer necessarily?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is when Athos then marries her, and he then discovers that she's been branded, and hangs her.
Oh, wait, what?
Yeah, that gets left out of the movie. I have notes on that later. But it doesn't work. She survives. And then she goes off again, and which at this point I think is then when she marries Lord de Winter in England.
And then that's the one she's arrested for murdering.
Yeah, she
in the film.
murders him and gets away with it.
Right. Yeah, because he calls her Sabine.
Yeah.
Is that her name in the book that you recall at any point? Like when Athos was with her? I don't know, because that's what he calls her. I assume it probably is, because that's what he calls her in the film.
Like reveal her. I don't even know if they reveal her actual name. They call her Charlotte at one point, but it's implied that that's not actually her name.
Okay.
They mostly just call her Milady.
Yeah, I mean, they do in the film, too. It's just literally only Athos. When he runs into her, he calls her Sabine. And I wasn't sure. Okay, interesting. Yeah, super fascinating character. And I also really, so in the film, I really like that we kind of don't know what her backstory specifically is. Like, again, we get elements, enough of it to kind of parse things out. But I really liked the idea that, I just liked the interplay of Athos's relationship with her, and the fact that he's kind of wrought with guilt over the way he handled the situation, and how he didn't trust her, and how that ultimately... I wish there was a way... I wish it ended up having more of, like... In the film, I wish it ended up having more of a... an effect on him down the road. Other than, like, him feeling bad about it. I wish... Because it's almost like... especially that line, I've become the monster you imagined I was, or whatever. I kind of wish that there was some repercussions for him for, like... what he did beyond, again, just like his emotional distraughtness over it. Like the idea of him creating this villain that then becomes this, which is kind of what it is, but it never really goes anywhere in the film. Like she just gets caught and dies and gives the information, and then like he apologizes to her. I kind of just wished it would have elevated, or I don't know. I wish it would have done something more dramatic. I just really like that. I don't know. I just really like the interplay of their story, and I wish there was more of it in the film. I understand why it's not, because it's not like important for like the main plot or whatever, and it's not particularly like a very kid friendly like backstory or whatever. You know, it's not something that makes a lot of sense to explore in a kids action adventure movie. That being said, I wish we had. Maybe some of the other films do more. I don't know. Who knows?
Probably.
Yeah. So I asked it earlier, kind of, but does the cardinal attempt to assassinate the king?
There are no assassination attempts on the king in this book.
Okay, so not That's not the plan.
No.
That we get in the film where he's like, I'm going to hire a sniper to snipe you from not even that far away.
Yeah.
From like,
I mean, it would have to be pretty close with the way that guns worked.
Yes,
back in the day.
Technology, yeah, the firearm technology back then. You're not sniping somebody from 1,500 meters or whatever. But yeah,
you're kind of just spraying bullets and hoping you hit something.
Well, I think it's a little more. Yeah, I think people who are really good at it's a little bit more reliable than that, but not because I don't even know if rifling had been invented yet because that was the big thing.
Yeah,
and I don't think it had. No, it definitely hadn't. If it had, it wasn't widespread. Because they were still using musket balls in the Civil War, so I don't know.
Well, yeah, they're muskets. They're the Musketeers.
Right, I understand that. I'm just saying that I was wondering, because rifling is a thing that made guns, like, super accurate.
Yeah.
Whereas musket balls, they just go wherever the heck. That's why they stood in big lines and shot at each other.
Yeah.
But anyways. Okay, we get this great scene in the film during the big fight at the end, big climactic battle between the Musketeers and the Cardinal's guards. And Athos, I believe, is fencing Rochefort at this point. This is before D'Artagnan gets there to fight him. And he ends up getting stabbed in his right arm and then picks up his sword with his left hand and it has a line about how he's just as good with his left hand or something like that. I wanted to know if that came from the book because I was like,
You have questions about who's referencing who?
Who's referencing who here?
I have the answer because there actually is a joke about this in the book. So at the beginning, when Athos and D'Artagnan are getting ready to fight their duel, Athos's right arm is already injured from a previous fight. Okay. And D'Artagnan thanks him for the honor of fighting him despite being wounded.
Honor culture is so
as you
stupid.
Do.
I hate honor culture.
But Athos then reassures him that he can use either hand. He says, "But I will take the left hand. It is my custom in such circumstances. Do not fancy that I do you a favor. I can use either hand easily, and it will even be a disadvantage to you. A left-handed man is very troublesome to people who are not prepared for it." So I have to assume that the Princess Bride is referencing Dumas.
I would almost guarantee that, yes, the Princess Bride is making a reference to that. But doing it in a fun, kind of interesting new twist on it by having it be like a surprise reveal instead of them discussing it beforehand or whatever, And then it being a double surprise reveal. No, that's fun. Yeah, no, that's interesting. Because, I was like, okay, so is the movie referencing Princess Bride or is the Princess Bride referencing the original novel?
Well, and it seems like it's fun, too, even because what Athos says about fighting with his left hand, I could see that being a line from the Princess Bride.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I could see Inigo saying that.
Do not fancy that I do you a favor. I can use either hand easily. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's fun. That's interesting. Well, now we know where that came from. Oh, I added a question here.
Oh, I thought I just missed one.
No, I added it late. I wanted to know, because as I was writing the synopsis, I was like, oh, I should put in a thing is if the king, the sweet little king,
the little lad who loves berries and cream.
If he, that actor, he's got a face, man.
Yes, he does.
Holy cow. I mean, it's obviously the hair is like he's got he looks like, what's his name?
Lord Farquaad.
Lord Farquaad, yeah. But anyways, he ends up punching the Cardinal out and saving the day at the end, I mean, not really.
The day was already
saved. He just kind of like gets to
he gets to punch him.
He gets to punch the Cardinal and be like kind of the big hero at the final moment. And I wanted to know if that element came from the book.
It does not.
Okay.
The king doesn't punch anybody. He's also kind of a dick in the book. So, as you do.
He's not a sweet little lad.
France. No.
Okay.
Alas.
And my final question, and so it sounds like D'Artagnan is very similar in the book. Does he get to become a musketeer at the end?
So D'Artagnan is a guardsman for most of the book. He gets promoted to the Musketeers like 3/4 of the way through.
Oh.
I do think it's more narratively satisfying to have that happen at the end, like it does in the movie.
Yeah. So the guardsman, is that just like, what is that? Is he working for like the king still? Basically?
Yeah,
Okay.
he's like in the king's guard, but he's not a musketeer.
A musketeer.
Yeah,
Okay.
musketeers
So it's
are like a more
the
elite special force.
Okay, fair enough. That's kind of what I assumed. I just wanted to make sure that understanding was correct. Fantastic. All right, let's find out what Katie thought was better in the book.
You like to read?
Oh, yes. I love to read.
What do you like to read?
Everything.
I made this note like right at the very beginning of the movie. Just, so far, I don't understand the movie's edition of Gerard and his brothers, which are the guys that are chasing D'Artagnan. Also, why does he sound like a literal chicken? No, put him screeching D'Artagnan next to the sound of the rooster from Moana.
Yep.
There's not a difference.
That's fair.
It's the same sound.
That's fair. I think the idea of why I can see why they did it, because it sounds like they at least maybe changed D'Artagnan's character a little bit in film. The scene in the film gives us a very quick and easy way to establish D'Artagnan's character, like and give us a fence, like a duel, like right off the bat. Basically, we get to see he's good at fighting immediately. We get to see that he's like a ladies' man, because the reason he's in this duel is because he was sleeping with some woman whose brothers are now mad at him for, besmirching her honor or whatever. And we get to see that he's like kind of smarmy, but like not like in an overly like
he's
jerky way. He's a
himself.
little full of himself, but he's also like, you could tell he's kind of like,
I mean, that's all not terribly different from how it is in the book.
I think it's just a very condensed way
Fair enough.
to kind of do all of that very quickly.
I do think that element should have stayed at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, I do think the whole thing where like they're chasing him the rest of the film doesn't really add much. And I thought, because in particular, I really thought that there was maybe the most like milquetoast lackluster final shot of a movie. Especially because they could have cut it 2 seconds earlier when they all put their swords in the air and we get the shot of them like, they say like, all for one for all, and we see their swords like clang together.
Could have done like a freeze frame.
Not even a freeze frame, just end it there. Or do a freeze frame. It's the 90s, why not? Who cares? It's the early 90s. But even if you don't do that, just like, and cut after that or give us something else. But we just end on a shot of all these nameless musketeers running down the road. It's like, okay, chasing some random guys. It's like, this is not that interesting. And then having that, I get the payoff. It's just like not that interesting of a payoff.
Yeah.
Especially because you get the feeling that like D'Artagnan could have handled them by himself. Like, I don't know. I thought that was very silly.
So in the movie, when D'Artagnan gets to like the Hall of the Musketeers or whatever, and it's very like, it's kind of somber, because they've been disbanded.
There's nobody there.
Yeah,
like,
there's nobody there.
Is the only guy
the
there.
banner's torn down, whatever. But they have not been disbanded in the book. And when he arrives at the Hall of the Musketeers, it's just filled with musketeers, like dueling and carousing. And it sounded pretty cool.
That would have been fun.
Yeah.
I imagine it's like a scene like in The Witcher, like rolling into the Witchers, whatever that's like Kaer Morhen or whatever, and like seeing all the Witchers like hanging out, drinking and fighting each other.
Yeah. So they do take a trip to England in the book. D'Artagnan is the only one who gets all the way to England, but it starts out all four of them. And it kind of ends up being this like comedy of errors where they lose like one person at a time throughout the trip. Where it's like, they're at an inn and somebody starts a fight and Porthos is like, I must stay behind and defend the honor of blah, blah, blah by participating in this duel. Go on without me. And then there's a following comedy of errors when D'Artagnan goes back and like picks them all up one by one. Like, is it Athos who has like holed himself up in the cellar at this place for like a week and has been like holding down the cellar and like eating all of this person's meat and drinking all of their wine. It's just, that's kind of like just silly and fun.
Yeah.
So in the book, the Queen of France is having an affair with the Duke of Buckingham. They're secret lovers.
Okay.
And the reason that D'Artagnan goes to England is to retrieve some jewelry that she gave him as like a memento, because there are political machinations, right. And basically she needs to produce this piece of jewelry. Otherwise, the king is going to know that she gave it to Buckingham, and her honor will be lost.
Okay.
So she needs to be able to produce this piece of jewelry. So D'Artagnan goes to get it. And while he is there with Buckingham, the Duke of Buckingham has like a shrine to the queen in his closet, like
nice.
A portrait and like little mementos from times they were like it absolutely unhinged hysterical moment,
like
in
Helga
this book.
Pataki
Yes.
from Hey Arnold,
yes,
and her
like,
shrine to
he
Arnold.
opens this little door and there's like a
chewing
portrait
gum.
and yes,
used tissues. Yeah, oh, that's great.
D'Artagnan at one point engages in an affair with Milady, and when she realizes, like, well, she knows who he is, but when she realizes, like, what all he's done and how he has, like, all of the ways that he's gummed up the works of her plans, she gets mad and she tries to murder him, but he escapes. He escapes from her house dressed in her maid's clothes.
Okay.
Flowery dress, big hat, the whole works.
Nice.
I said the book was very funny.
No, yeah, there's lots. Yeah, it definitely sounds like a slapstick, like, yeah, laugh a minute.
She also, at one point after that, sends some assassins after him, and they shoot at him, but they miss. But one of the bullets goes through his hat. At which point, he determines that they were assassins and not like regular enemy soldiers, because he's at like a battlefield at this point. Mm-hmm. And he determines that they were in fact assassins by Sherlocking the bullet hole. He like looks at it and he's like, this was no ordinary musket.
Maybe it was. Does it have rifling? Was it?
I don't know. I don't remember exactly what he said it was.
Huh.
But yeah. So interesting moment there. Also, while they're all at that like battle site, it's the siege of La Rochelle is where they are. And D'Artagnan and crew all have breakfast in this fort that they recently chased the enemy army out of. And as they're having breakfast, they're also like single-handedly holding this fort down while the enemy sends greater and greater numbers of forces. And it was probably the most like swashbuckly impressive thing that happened in the entire book.
Well, that sounds fun. That would have been fun to see.
I mentioned the money thing earlier, and I had a lot of thoughts on that. It was just a recurring thing throughout the book that they were always broke and like scheming for how to get more money. But they all share their money amongst themselves, which I thought was very cute.
Bro code.
Yeah, they were like, anytime one of them would get some money, he'd be like, here, guys, let's split it up.
All for one and one for all. There you go. It's in the tagline.
Generally, there's a lot more intrigue in the book than there is in the movie. There are like a lot of like secret passages, lots of finding clever ways to eavesdrop on conversations, forgeries, stolen identities, that sort of thing.
More espionage.
Mm-hmm. I thought this movie really wasted the story's female characters. Not that there are tons of them. Anne of Austria and Constance are kind of barely in the movie. Constance queen, right? Especially. Yeah, Anne is the queen. Constance, they're not really in a ton of the book either, but they have, I think, more interesting scenes in the book. And Milady, I can see your point about her character being interesting and layered in the movie, but she just kind of came across to me, having read the book, as defanged.
And that's fair. That could totally be fair. I'm not saying that she's not, I could see that her book version could definitely be even, more interesting. I it's not even so much her character, I guess. I just like the whole dynamic of the story of her relationship with Athos and stuff.
Yeah. She's pure evil in the book. Such a fun villain. The OG gaslight gatekeep girl boss.
Nice.
She had a couple lines. When I am insulted, I do not faint. I revenge myself.
Nice.
And also, such women as I never weep. And I want both of those on a t-shirt.
Yeah. Yeah, that first one's great.
My last note here is just a general note about Dumas' prose. The book is cover to cover witty repartee, sick burns, and one-liners that go hard. Like, if you enjoy that element of writers like Shakespeare, don't sleep on Dumas.
Okay.
I have a couple examples here. You eat at everybody's mess.
I don't know what that means.
Like,
I know. I guess because without context, it's hard to know like what.
You stick your nose into everybody's mess and drama.
Oh,
kind of a thing.
Okay.
You eat at everybody's mess.
Okay. When I saw mess, I was literally thinking like a mess hall.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
He talked for the pleasure of talking and for the pleasure of hearing himself talk. That head has never conspired. You are a model for regular people.
That's a good one. That's really good.
Soiling my sword with the blood of a wretch like you. And my favorite, the four friends are discussing, I don't remember what. They're like hatching a plan to do something. And Porthos says, I should like, however, to comprehend. And Athos says, that is useless.
Oh, it's fun. Yeah, it definitely feels, you can definitely feel elements of, not elements, you could tell very clearly that Goldman was a fan, because it's writing a lot of that reeks of The Princess Bride. And it's very funny because one of my main criticisms of the film is that it didn't have any, like not any, but it didn't have very many memorable like lines and one-liners and exchanges. There are a few. I mentioned the one earlier, but even that, like the one with Milady de Winter about becoming the nightmare he thought she was or whatever. It's a fine line, but it's not like, you know, there wasn't a ton of like great like moments where somebody has like a really great zinger. Or
it's not a super quotable movie.
No, and I think that's maybe its biggest flaw, because I think a lot of it is fun and works really well, like just as like a swashbuckling
and I think it is a flaw that is exacerbated by having come from source material that is so rife with great one-liners and sick burns.
Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and talk about what Katie thought was better in the movie.
My life has taught me one lesson, Hugo, and not the one I thought it would. Happy endings only happen in the movies.
I liked the opening scene, the boat on the creepy water and like the sick torture chambers.
Yeah.
I liked that the movie gave Rochefort an eye patch. He has like a little scar by his eye in the book, but just do the thing all the way.
Yeah,
just do it. Speaking of villains, though, Tim Curry, gotta give it up to that guy. He plays a bang up villain.
He's great. How could you not love him?
At one point, one of the Musketeers, Porthos, drops a chandelier on some of the Cardinal's guards.
A big wooden chandelier.
And I love a good chandelier drop.
Yeah.
I'm a former theater kid.
How can you not?
We all love chandelier drops, am I right?
Absolutely.
So the initial, I say the initial duel, there's a duel before this duel. But when he's going to duel the Musketeers, and then they end up dueling with the Cardinal's guards. In the book, that's in like like one of the back streets, like kind of an alleyway or something. So I thought that moving that fight to a place with a lot of good set pieces was really fun.
Because they meet in the ruins outside of the city, so it's like these old like
so they have like walls to climb on and stuff, and things to jump off of.
Yep. You know, where also the first duel in the movie takes place in ruins is Princess Bride.
True.
And the ruins at the top of the cliff of insanity.
Gotta love a gun hidden inside a Bible.
Yes.
gotta love that.
Yeah. I love that moment too. After he shoots the guy, he does the
yes
with the gun. He does the I don't even know what that's called.
The sign of the cross.
Yeah, the sign of the cross. I didn't grow up Catholic. I don't know what that.
Good thing you have me.
Yep.
I love Milady's hairpin knife.
She tries to stab D'Artagnan with it.
Yeah, fantastic. I liked that the king in the movie was just like an ineffectual youth and not an asshole, because he's an asshole in the book, and like that's probably real life.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It was kind of nice. Like, I liked that he actually liked the queen, because in the book, he really just bullies her all the time.
Yeah. I was like, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about like a very super sympathetic depiction of monarchy.
Yeah.
But still, I think it works in the film.
It works in the context of the film.
In the context of the film, yeah.
I love in the final fight, this was Porthos maybe? Yells, "Come on, D'Artagnan, we're saving the king."
Every good line in this movie is Porthos, pretty much.
It's true, yeah.
Almost, yeah.
Except for this one.
Yes.
When the cardinal is getting away and Aramis, our priest musketeer, he's like,
Charlie Sheen.
Yeah, yes.
Which is hilarious.
He's like, "Then you will answer to God." And Tim Curry shoots him and says, you first.
Yeah.
And I loved that. That actually sounded like something Dumas would have written.
Yeah, that's funny, because it's just we both burst out laughing because it's like something out of a gangster movie.
Yeah,
it's just so silly, but it worked in the moment, and it's fun.
My last note here: I thought it made sense to have a final showdown for D'Artagnan and Rochefort. In the book, they are like immediately set up as adversaries, but it doesn't go anywhere.
What happens to Rochefort?
Nothing.
Okay. Maybe it gets resolved in a later book or something? Or?
Yeah, maybe. It's just really nothing happens there.
Okay, fair enough. All right. We got a couple things to talk about in the movie. Nailed it.
As I expected, practically perfect in every way.
Well, we kind of already talked about this, but the way that they all become friends is through that fight with the Cardinal's men. They bond in battle. I have not the uniform, but I have the spirit.
Yeah.
It's from
D'Artagnan
the book.
says that to him when he wants to be a musketeer.
Athos does tell D'Artagnan the story of his friend's marriage while they're drunk.
Yeah.
I mentioned this before.
Yeah.
The movie does conveniently leave out that Athos just like tried to hang her in a blind rage.
Yeah, not as sympathetic.
No,
just
not
turning
not
her over
super
or whatever to the authorities.
There is kind of a funny moment later though when he finds out that she's like still alive and running around, and he's like, "But I hanged her so effectively." And I was like, apparently not,
Apparently
dude.
you did not, man.
Apparently you did a super bad job.
You hanged her very ineffectively. Yeah.
And just generally, D'Artagnan is like a young, brash dumbass.
Yeah.
That's his character.
Getting himself into problems.
Yeah, he's a youthful dumbass.
Yeah. Lots of unforced errors.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, we got a handful of odds and ends before we get to the final verdict.
So the opening credits, before it pulled back to reveal like the boat and everything, I was like, what is this background? Because it reminded me of the weird goo in the opening credits of Ben and Arthur.
I knew you were gonna say that.
I was like, what is this? And then it pulls back and I was like, oh, weird, ominous water, naturally.
Yeah.
But of course.
Yeah. I thought the set looked like it could have been straight out of Phantom of the Opera. Like the boat in the tunnels. And I was like, I haven't seen Phantom, but I've looked from the videos and like music videos and stuff I've seen it like every time. It doesn't.
Yeah, he does like, ride a boat around in an underground like caves and tunnels.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I don't know if it's supposed to be like the same.
I wonder if they may have filmed them in similar, because I talked in the prequel that this scene, the boat thing in the under is somewhere in Poland. I can't remember now. I had it in the prequel. I mentioned
somewhere.
It was some specific place that and parts of the set are still there.
Yeah.
And I wonder, it wouldn't surprise me if it's been used in lots of movies. And it wouldn't surprise me if Phantom was one of them. We talked about the brothers chasing D'Artagnan around for the whole movie, and I was like, talk about luck. D'Artagnan gets into Paris. Paris are probably the largest city in the world at this point, maybe up there. Or,
certainly up there.
In the 1600s or whatever. It's got to be up there among the biggest cities in the world. And he comes out of the... I guess maybe he did tell him he was going to be a musketeer, so maybe they went to the musketeer place. But he comes out of somewhere, and they're just immediately right there. And I'm like, man, that is some luck.
Yeah. No, Paris, definitely one of those places you could just disappear into.
Yeah.
Then that is kind of a complaint that I have about like the set pieces on this movie, is that it felt very small.
Yeah.
Like Paris didn't feel like
it did not
city.
feel like a big city. You get a couple shots, and you get there where you can, there's like one shot as he's coming in where you see what's the church?
Notre Dame.
Notre Dame in the background.
Okay, I know you weren't raised Catholic, but that feels...
I've been to Notre Dame. I've seen it. I've been inside of it. So I just was blanking on what it was called. Yeah. But anyways, but I would agree. Paris doesn't, we don't get a particularly like... You could do a very fun like chase through the streets of Paris that utilized a lot of stuff that would have been very fun to see, and they don't really do.
They don't really utilize it. I couldn't tell if Charlie Sheen's beauty mark was supposed to be historical.
I must have missed it. I didn't even.
He has a
notice
little
this.
beauty mark on his cheek, and it stuck out to me because nobody else has one. Not even the royalty, and from my understanding of it is that it would be historically accurate for them to have those little beauty marks, but he's the only one who's got one.
I didn't even notice it.
Maybe he had a zit.
Yeah, maybe. Could have been.
Speaking of hair and makeup choices, though, I think the notes for Kiefer Sutherland's hair and makeup must have just been as much like Kenneth Branagh as possible.
It's fair. Yeah. He also just kind of looks like Kiefer Sutherland.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like in Young Guns, he looks basically the exact same, which was like a Western that came out Kyle and I mentioned this in one of the episodes we recorded. And Leonard Maltin called it, I think it was Leonard Maltin, called it Young Swords or whatever, because Charlie Sheen and Kiefer Sutherland were both in Young Guns. But I'm pretty sure Kiefer Sutherland looked exactly the same in Young Guns as he does in this movie.
We kind of mentioned this earlier, but it's super hilarious to me that Charlie Sheen is the priest musketeer.
It's very funny. It is very, very funny. In the big duel scene in the ruins outside of Paris at the beginning, there's this moment, and I understand why it happens. I just had to mention it because it was just very funny to me, where as D'Artagnan is going to escape, he gets on a horse, and then him and Rochefort like charge at each other, and he's holding his sword, and as they're charging, he's holding it out kind of like they're jousting, but he's with his rapier or whatever, and then as soon as he gets up to him, he pulls it back and swings it at him, which is like the worst thing you could do. Yeah. Like holding it out like that at maximum range is like ideally what you want to do, but you want to try to like deflect his and stab him. But he just pulls it back and wails on him, and it looks so silly. It's a little detail, but I was like, okay. But again, because you can't. There's not really a good safe way to like do. So it's just swinging it around looks. It's an easy way to make it look, but it looks so stupid.
Can we talk about Milady's Padawan braid?
Yeah,
because that was a choice.
Yeah.
I don't know what that was about.
Maybe it's historical. I have no idea. It's not like,
honestly, I guess it could be.
Yeah. I don't know what it would have been inspired by other than some historical.
But it looked real weird.
I don't disagree. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It didn't strike me as a particularly 1993 like, it didn't look to me like something where it was like a hairstyle of 1993 that just like snuck into the historical drama or whatever. It just I don't know. So to me, I was like,
she just has a long single thin braid.
Yeah, that comes down from the back
over her shoulder.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm betting it was a thing. Because they had some details in this movie that were surprisingly accurate, despite how silly and ridiculous a lot of it is. There's during that chase scene, one of my other again, Porthos I thought was just great, but they're on that chase and he pulls out the wine and he opens a bottle of champagne and he's like, champagne? And Athos is like, this is a chase, and he's like, you're right, something red. And it's so much fun. I could, and not that I ever would because this movie's not that good, but I was like, I could easily do Athos, like an Athos cosplayer costume, because like I just look like him already. Like if I grew my hair out, I just would look. He looks like my dad. When my dad from like the 80s had like long hair, that's what my dad looked like, is Kiefer Sutherland in this movie. But I love Oliver Platt's costume, and I think it's just. I think it makes sense because it is kind of like pirate inspired a little bit, but he has like his headband, and I think he's got like the most fun costume. Everybody else is kind of boring. His is
he's got
like sashes and like I think his costume would be fun to do.
There was one moment, I don't think it was supposed to be funny, but I couldn't help laughing. And it was when Tim Curry was releasing all of the messenger pigeons. Yes. And there was this super ominous music sting as he's like watching these pigeons like flap around in the air. I could not.
It was pretty funny. It was pretty funny. So we talked about in the prequel that Charlie Sheen wasn't involved because he was filming something else or something.
Yeah.
In the 6-week boot camp for sword fighting and horse riding and all that the other ones went through. And I read somewhere on IMDb or something that if you notice in the movie, he doesn't do much sword fighting. He's mainly like punching people and stuff. And he definitely does.
He does
fencing.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is definitely less than the other ones. And I thought it was noticeably clumsier than the others. There's one particular moment where he does the exact thing. It's got a name, and it's from like historical fencing manuals, where he like drops to the ground and like puts it's in the scene in The Princess Bride where they're in the castle and Wesley's like Fezzik is carrying Wesley and they're in the hallway and Count Rugen shows up with like the 4 guards, and this is the first time that Inigo is like confronting him. And he says, he does his little spiel, you killed my father, prepare to die. And then he sends the guards at him. And Inigo kills all 4 of the guards. The last guard he kills, he does the same maneuver. And Charlie Sheen does that in this movie in the end fight scene. And it looks so bad compared to, what's his name, doing it in Princess Bride. It's hilarious. And that was one of those moments where I was like, I could tell you did not have nearly as much training as everybody else did on this.
I just want to mention this because I think it's funny. So the big line that is so strongly associated with the Three Musketeers.
I was going to ask about this. Yeah.
All for one and one for all.
Yeah.
Appears literally once in the original text.
That's wild.
In 700 pages. Maybe they utilize it more in the sequels. I don't know. But it's funny to me that particular line got so strongly associated with it.
What is the context of when it's used in the book? Do you remember?
He says, like, D'Artagnan says, like, all for one, is that not our motto? And then they're all like, yeah, all for one and one for all. Blah. And it's very early in the book.
Right.
And then they never say it again.
They never say it again. Then it's not like a rallying cry or anything. That's fun. That's funny. I should have asked whether or not that even came from the book, but yeah. I honestly just assumed it did.
It definitely does. It's just that, it's not like, it does not feature as heavily in the text as I would have guessed prior to reading it.
Yeah.
Another thing that made me laugh is how lucky D'Artagnan got really just like happened to see that sniper
Yeah.
up on the roof.
He's like,
Like,
oh,
just
hey,
looked like right in the exact spot.
There he is. Look at that.
Look at that. Huh.
Oh, we could take care of that.
Sniper.
We mentioned it, but this movie. So obviously, the left-handed fencing thing came from the book, and Princess Bride is probably doing that. But I still think there were some details in this movie that was definitely like.
Yeah.
Like aping a little bit on Princess Bride. In particular, the design of the sword.
Yes.
That is his father's sword.
Yes.
That is like gold and glittery. Like it looks almost exactly like Inigo's father's sword in The Princess Bride. And then the whole confrontation between Rochefort and him at the end where they're talking about his father. Like it just all felt very, very similar, very much inspired by, which I thought is fine. It doesn't do it in a way that's like too obnoxious. And if you're gonna steal from the best. So
one of my biggest takeaways after reading the book is Matt Berry adaptation. When?
Okay, Matt Berry is who? Every character?
Yes. Just Matt Berry.
Yeah.
Every single character, even the female characters. Porthos is an obvious
Porthos
choice.
feels obvious, but
I also think he would make a really fun Cardinal Richelieu.
yeah, that would be good. I think it would be really fun to just take the entire cast of What We Do in the Shadows and do the Three Musketeers with those actors in different roles. Like I think would be really interesting.
Yeah, that would be funny.
Guillermo as D'Artagnan, I think would be great. I think that'd be a lot of fun. He really wants to be a musketeer. I think it'd be fantastic. Oh man! I think Nandor as like Athos.
Yeah, it works.
I think you could line it all up and really make it work in a way that would be
Nadja would be a great milady.
Yeah. I think you have wait, I'm trying to think who he would be. I'm trying to think who Colin Robinson would be. And I'm not sure.
He could be Aramis.
Yeah, I guess he could. I don't know if that tracks necessarily quite so well, but I guess he could. Anyways. And it's I don't think it's age necessarily the best, but All for Love, the end credit song written by Bryan Adams, but performed by Bryan Adams, Rod Stewart, and Sting is a banger. I don't care what anybody else says. It's also in the score, which is great.
Yeah.
Like the main theme in the movie, like the orchestral score is the All for Love thing, which is it's fun. I love it. I thought that song's great.
Okay, so I had a journey reading this. Like, partway through, I was like, how has this property been adapted multiple times, specifically for children?
Yeah.
Because I was like reading, and I was like, this whole plot is about like the queen having an affair and them having to go get her jewelry, which I'm not saying that there isn't a way you could do that for kids, but like it doesn't scream kid story to me,
Yeah.
So I started looking up the plot synopses of different film adaptations
yeah.
of this, and I was utterly delighted to discover that the common approach to adapting the Three Musketeers seems to be, let's take the idea of D'Artagnan and the Musketeers and then tell an entirely different story.
Yeah. It's a good framework.
Yeah.
It's a good framework. And we'll just do what we want with it. Yeah, because it's a good setup. Like the beginning and the setup, and then like you can do whatever you want with it.
Do whatever swashbuckly heroic thing you want.
Yeah. No, I think it makes perfect sense. It makes
Because like if you had
Is there a Muppeteers? There's gotta be, right?
I don't think there is.
A Muppet Musketeers? There must.
That seems very obvious.
Seems like obvious, but now that's the one. Muppet Musketeers, Cardinal Richelieu, played by Matt Berry.
Yes.
Is the only human.
Yes.
Is the
yes.
only human. That's the movie.
Get Hollywood on the phone now.
That's the movie right there. That would be incredible. That would be so much fun. Oh, God.
Oh.
Miss Piggy is my Lady de Winter.
Yes.
Come
yes.
on. Come on. It's like just there for the taking. It'd be incredible. Oh, my goodness. Oh, we wanted to remind you, as always, you can do us a giant favor by heading over to patreon.com/thisfilmislit. Support us there for a few bucks a month. Get access to bonus content, including this month. We did Labyrinth. No, that was last month.
This month we're doing
the Santa Claus. But Labyrinth just came out last week or whatever. So if you want to hear us talk about Labyrinth, go support us for $5 a month on Patreon, and you can hear that. But yes, we will have an episode on the Santa Claus coming out here in just sometime before Christmas. You will be hearing an episode about the Santa Claus, among other stuff. And if you support us at the $15 and up level, before we get to that, also support us or go follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Goodreads, all those places. Leave us a like, leave us a follow, interact with us. We'd like to hear what you have to say about the Three Musketeers. If you support us on Patreon at the $15 and up level, you get access to priority recommendations, which is what this was, a patron request from
Ian from Wine Country.
Ian from Wine Country. So thank you, Ian. Thank you very much for supporting us, and thank you for requesting the Three Musketeers. It's time now to find out what Katie's final verdict is.
Now, are you ready for your sentence?
Sentence? But there must be a verdict first.
Sentence first, verdict afterward.
What can I say about this one? The novel is a classic, but it definitely has its faults. It bears many of the classic hallmarks of a novel published serially, which we have discussed on this show before. It is less of a cohesive story and more of a sprawling set of smaller stories. And there are plot threads and other elements that are introduced and subsequently vanish. And while witty repartee was fun, there were definitely moments when I wanted them to just get to the point already. I had never read this book before, and with the Musketeers now being so ingrained in the fabric of popular culture, I was surprised to find that they're kind of awful. They bully their servants, they're entitled, they use their status and their muscle to manipulate and intimidate other people, and they generally crash around not caring what kind of chaos they cause for all of the normal working people around them. At one point, while reading this, I held the book up to you and said, all I have to say right now is ACAB.
Yes, you did.
But I do think that might be part of the point. Again, I'm not particularly well-versed in French history, but I think Dumas intended all of the characters to be flawed. I think that's part of the social commentary of the time. It seems like the idea of the Musketeers as noble paragons of honor and virtue came later as the story disseminated into pop culture. And that brings us to the movie. The movie offers a more structured, concise plotline, as well as being general silly fun, but that is kind of all it has going for it. Some of the performances were really good, but a lot of them are middling. The set and the costumes aren't super special, and there's not anything revolutionary going on with the reimagining of the story, characters, or message. I may not understand all the historical intricacies of what Dumas is saying, but I understand that he had a message. I also admire his command of language, which shows even in translation. For those reasons, I'm giving this one to the book.
I mean, I wasn't expecting it really to go any other way with at least with this adaptation of the book. But yeah, maybe one day we'll have to re-examine. There's 8 trillion adaptations.
Oh yeah, that's a well we could return to.
The Three Musketeers, absolutely. So, Katie, what's next?
Up next, we have our Christmas episode, and we will be talking about The Greatest Gift and its film adaptation, It's a Wonderful Life.
I honestly do not know if I've ever seen this movie start to finish. I have seen lots of parts of this movie.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have ever watched this movie in its entirety.
I know I have, Because it's one of my mom's favorites,
Yeah.
but it's one that she'll just like put on.
Yeah.
Like we don't like sit and
That's
watch
what I'm
it.
saying. I've seen it like in that context of like being at
Yeah.
a Christmas party or whatever, and it's like on, and I've seen, you know, and I've probably seen the whole film in pieces and bits and parts over my life. I just don't know if I've ever sat down, and even then, I probably have like when I was younger and just don't remember. I just don't know, and I don't know. I'm interested to see how I feel about it because I think I might not like it. But we'll see.
We'll find out.
I might. I don't know. I have no idea. We'll see. I have no idea. We will find out. That's going to be in 2 weeks' time. We're talking about It's a Wonderful Life. In 1 week's time, come on back. We'll be getting your reaction to the Three Musketeers, what you had to say about it, and we'll be learning some stuff about It's a Wonderful Life and whatnot. So until that time, guys, gals, non-binary pals, and everybody else,
Keep reading books
watching movies,
and keep being awesome.